When the silence screamed loud and the demons called out, the roses turned black and the stars dimmed out. When the soul's deep went invisible, while the darkness turned invincible. When the vision blacked out and terror went about, with the clouds on fire and the devil to conspire. Truth be told, this poem is my shady alter ego's imaginative ability could reach. By the way, this alter ego of mine tends to appear after I, not so literally, cry my eyes out. Also, it appears to be a whole lot more creative than I actually am, as the poem itself suggests. Now, the point behind bragging so much about my mysterious alter ego is to prove something really astonishing as well as important about secretion of liquid containing proteins, enzymes, lipids, and other substances from the lacrimal apparatus in response to an emotional state very different from lacrimation, which is crying, obviously. As unbelievable as this may sound, but crying can actually make you more creative. Some of the most creative people in the history have happened to be the most emotional. Ernest Hemingway, an American journalist and novelist, for instance, quoted, "There is nothing to write. Is sit down at a typewriter and bleed." No wonder he was loaded with creativity. Think of it as how your pain can inspire others. And I'm sure soon enough you won't be able to keep track of how exactly you turned into this soul stirring poet. So, quick tip, just embrace your feelings and spill creativity along those tears. But hold on, there's a lot more to crying than just creativity. It reminds you of the fact that you aren't really a robot on autopilot. It's a reminder of how you're capable of emotions, of your ability to get hurt, of the fact that you can breathe, that you belong to this mysteriously weird species of animals, that you're human anyway. You see, the truth is we aren't as strong as we pretend, not only with others, but even with ourselves. So, this innate talent we think we're blessed with of bottling up our emotions into elegant jars of our mind is nothing less than a myth. Take it from a teenager who has a messy room and has tried bottling up with everything possible from novels to Netflix. But along the efforts of being rational, it's impossible to simply ignore a part of you and pretend how things don't matter. Think of it like this. It's like avoiding a best friend, even when you know it in your gut how bad you want to hug her to make things right, and yet you let your ego win. Now, you might wonder what this analogy has anything to do with your relationship with emotions, but mind you, it does. You avoid your feelings even when you feel like letting it all out and simply embrace them, because somehow you know that's going to make things right. Yet, you don't do so because you're too occupied with lying to yourself about how you're not so vulnerable. After all, the ego likes to protect its image, and vulnerability is a crack in its armor. But you also happen to be too perfect to let your vulnerable side crack that fancy armor, and in the process, letting your ego win. Now, let's look at another aspect, how hitting pause on your emotions for too long is not so healthy. First, you need to understand something about inevitability. You see, the fact that you're going to explode out with your emotions one way or another is inevitable. Doesn't seem serious enough? Then hear this out. Your suppressed feelings can manifest themselves in escapist behavior, which may include substance abuse, reckless driving, and dangerous sports. Studies have shown that bottling up your emotions can lead to increased risk of developing heart disease and certain forms of cancer. They can also lead to physical and mental illness and can potentially even shorten your lifespan. But on the positive side, there's a way out. So that lacrimal apparatus I talked about in the beginning, yeah, you're right. I'm indeed suggesting that crying can contribute towards your longevity. Now I understand that's an intriguing fact I just stated, but always come with details to fulfill one's curiosity. To get relieved of the bottle of feelings in order to carry out a healthy and perpetual life, crying can definitely help. Out of the three types of tears secreted by the lacrimal ducts in your body, which are reflex tears, emotional tears, and continuous tears, your emotional tears tend to have special health benefits. Biochemist and tear expert Dr. William Frey at the Ramsey Medical Center in Minneapolis discovered that reflex tears are 98% water, whereas emotional tears also contain stress hormones that get excreted from the body while crying. After studying the composition of tears, Dr. Frey found that emotional tears shed these hormones and other toxins that accumulate during stress. Additional studies also suggest that crying for a long amount of time releases oxytocin and endogenous opioids, otherwise known as endorphins, which happen to be our body's painkillers and feel-good hormones. These feel-good chemicals can ease both physical and emotional pain. In fact, crying can help you self-soothe in one more way. Researchers have found that crying activates the parasympathetic nervous system, that is the PNS, and the PNS helps your body rest and digest. Though the results aren't immediate, it may take several minutes of tearing before the soothing effects of crying could be felt. So, to sum things up, a good cry releases and flushes toxic stress hormones from the body, calms and soothes, and creates fellow feelings. So, yeah, when I mentioned about the way out to the lacrimal apparatus, I meant it quite literally. Now, I'll be sharing my wisdom about inevitability once again. The fact that life is hard is inevitable, says the 15-year-old. Fine, but I can assure you one thing that I'm quite great at making predictions. So when I suggest the fact that life is going to be hard is inevitable, you can blindly trust me on that. You'll have to deal with failure, heartbreaks, regret, the seven deadly sins, and even grief. You see, dealing with grief is not a one step procedure. It involves stages of sorrow, numbness, guilt, and anger. And above all, this process is gradual. Crying in particular is very important during these stages. It can help you go through handling and accepting the loss of a loved one, so one could move on and continue living with open heart and mind. Otherwise, one can definitely be set up for depression. If the wisdom of a 15-year-old is still not sufficient, hear this out. The Roman poet Ovid from 43 BCE has already written that it is some relief to weep. Grief is satisfied and carried off by tears. So this automatically proves that the idea of healing effects of crying is rather old, dating back to the classical antiquity, even if there is limited scientific literature on the functions of crying. Also, a review of popular American and British magazines from 1848 until 1985 revealed that people undoubtedly believe that crying is good for one's mental and physical health. Finally, I'll be presenting my one last theory about inevitability. The fact that you will get tired of being not so vulnerable is inevitable. Someday you'll have to let it all out, even if it be the hard way. So why not just do it anyway? Why not embrace our feelings as our own because ultimately they are our own? Why not make it okay to cry? Even if we feel judged, even if it means breaking through the egoistic armor, if it means letting go of outmoded, untrue conceptions. Even when the society tells us to man up, even when a problem persists, even if the entire world ends up on our shoulders. Because there's always a way out, through the lacrimal apparatus I've been talking about, obviously. So, a few more words of wisdom from the young lady. Be a crybaby instead. Thank you.